Right. Hello, guys. Welcome once again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And this is the April edition of Agriculture 4.0. You're welcome. You're welcome on this webinar. So it is the April edition of Agriculture 4.0. And I would like you to quickly introduce yourself. Um, just in the format in the banner below, moving. Um, for example, your name is Olawale, you're joining from Akure, Nigeria, your town, location, and the country. We would like to know where you're joining us from Uganda, from Kenya, from Morocco, from Egypt, and anywhere you are from around the world. I would be happy to welcome you on board once again. So tonight we are talking, Dr. Franz is here. Dr. Franz is here to actually take us through the theme, Revolutionizing Agriculture with Remote Sensing and Precision Farming. And he is an expert in the field. I am very glad to actually welcome you, Dr. Rodriguez. So just for you to see our face, that we are actually set and ready. And guess what, guys? We must have this webinar. I am presently stuck in an airport, so if you kind of hear some usual announcements in this location, please do not mind. We would get on with it. So introduce yourself. I would like to meet you, welcome you. And so without further ado, I would go straight into why are we here? Okay, why are we here? So one of the reasons, the main reason why we're here is to actually, this is a webinar, Agriculture 4.0 webinar is actually one of our initiatives to enlighten you about trends and trends of emerging technologies, changing agriculture, or more particularly to raise your awareness, enlighten you and get you exposed to latest technology or emerging technology that is actually very important and disrupting agriculture positively. And much more, how you can actually position yourself with this knowledge and skill, spurring your passion or spurring innovation within you to actually provide solutions in the agricultural space. Because agriculture is very important. Of course, that's where we get food. That's where we get shelter, from products from agriculture, fiber, energy also. So it's quite important for us to actually be concerned about agriculture. So guys, you're welcome once again. Now, I'm just going to, today my name is Femi Adekoya, and I will be your host. I'm the head of training and also the visioneer of Precision Seed Academy. Now, and I am joined and I'm hosting my guest, Dr. Francelino Rodriguez, is the senior scientist at Lincoln Agritech Limited, based in New Zealand. And guess what? This is evening for me. This is morning for him. So we do not take this for granted. Waking up this very morning to actually dish us with solid knowledge and to impact us. All right. So I would be introducing into Precision Seed Academy, that is the organization that actually facilitates this and ensuring that we can be able to have something worthwhile like this. So you're welcome, guys. So who are these people called Precision Seed Academy? We are actually a social enterprise. We train and we build the capacity of young professionals in modern and emerging technologies. All right. So that's actually just a minute. Okay. All right. So what's our vision? Our vision is to actually create a world where every young person, okay, regardless of your background, you have the opportunity to become a digital savvy farmer or agricultural professional, driving sustainable and equitable growth in their community through transformative power of technology. We believe in technology. We believe that technology is actually a tool that we can actually leverage to transform agriculture wherever we are. So I believe, as a person, I believe in the power of technology. And Precision Field Academy, particularly, believes in the power and the transformative power of technology. Technology is actually not uh, the panacea of every of our problem, but when we as bright minds, innovative young minds can undo technology, the sky is just the beginning, and the possibilities are limitless. All right. So, what our mission? Our mission is to actually raise the next generation of farmers and agricultural professionals that are tech inclined and are digital savvy. That's just as simple as that. So every of our activity, whatever we do, is geared towards our mission, raising the next generation of farmers who are tech inclined and are digital savvy. So now, I've actually said that we are actually a social enterprise. Yes, a social enterprise because we are actually focused on changing the society. I mean, bringing impact, social impact, increasing your skill, um, bringing knowledge, just to change the agricultural landscape and in turn also having impact on our world. And I've also said how important agriculture is, and agriculture will be transformed when we, as youth, bright minds, can be able to leverage technology, create technology, develop technology, be innovative with technology, and drive the hem of technology. You know, yeah. Now, what are methodologies? We have three methodologies, and or methodology. Okay, and we then have them in three forms to achieve our mission and our goal. One, education and knowledge sharing. So what we are doing here today, or at the moment, is actually classified under education and knowledge sharing. Our webinar Agriculture 4.0 is actually our initiative to actually educate our participants, our community, or our tech inclined community, agricultural community, and also share them with knowledge, progressive knowledge, knowledge about emerging technology that is changing stuff, impacting them with the awareness and exposure needed to actually take on the world with technology, technological innovation in particular. The second methodology is training and skill development. Training and skill development. We know that just having the knowledge is not enough. Just knowing about it is not enough. You need to be trained. You need to actually develop the skill necessary for you to actually take on problems and actually provide solution with the skills that you have. But you cannot get skill without not being trained. So you cannot develop skill without you not being committed. So this is why we have training and skill development. So we have different kinds of trainings on drone technology, GIS that we have facilitated, and in increasing capacity of people. And this is more or less what we are doing. And lastly, which is very, very important and core to me, coaching and mentorship. Coaching and mentorship helps you, guides you, allows you to, gives you the opportunity to shorten the time for you to actually acquire skill or moving in a direction. You want to build career in agriculture. You want to actually see, okay, I am actually you want to actually build a career in agriculture, and you're thinking what's going to be the future of agriculture. How can I position myself for this career, for this, you know that something is going to change, but how do you get there? This is actually true. We do this through coaching and mentorship. So reach out to us for mentorship, for coaching, guidance about different aspects of that you are actually looking forward to actually take on in the agricultural value chain, and most especially when we talk about technology. Now, what are the skills? Now, what are the skills that we have to offer you? What are the skills that we have to offer you? When we said that one of our core methodology is training and skill development. One of the tech skills in general, we'll not really talk about tech skills, is one, drone technology. Drone technology are becoming more veritable. I, as I'm the earlier flying farmer. I've used drone technology, and this is actually where I actually specialize, to deliver solutions. So we train you with drone in drone technology and different use cases in drone technology, from you being qualified as a licensed drone pilot to being an industry expert or industry professional who is armed with the skill, with the knowledge necessary to actually take on the industry. And number two, geographic information technology and remote sensing. So remote sensing, and we're talking about remote sensing today. We are also building the skills of youth and individuals on this. And the next is data science for agriculture. Data science is changing things. We hear data everywhere. Data is a new oil. So data science is actually critical for us to actually deliver and see ourselves to playing in the fourth agricultural revolution. And these are skills that are changing the game. These are digital skills. And the next is robotics and the Internet of Things, IoT. This is actually one of the aspects. We also talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning in that regard. And lastly, enterprise development. We know that it's not just enough to actually know about technology, but how can we actually transfer this technology and make them into products that is value driven, and impactful to the society, turning into business. All right. So apologies for that. Like I said, I'm actually in the usual place. It's an airport. So let's go on. So why do we do what we do? I need to be fast so that we can get into the business of the day. But you need to know, why do we do what we do? And that means, what our motivation? What are we seeing? Number one, there is a skill gap to be closed. Young professionals need to build skills. You, as a young professional, you as a wannabe, or you aspire to actually be like Dr. Francelino. You want to be an expert. You want to actually be playing in the field of remote sensing and all that. You need to actually build skills, both technical and enterprise skills, for the future of work in agriculture. So what we are actually doing here is to actually prepare you for the future of work and tech in agriculture. And secondly, is that we have observed it, that observing the trend is not just enough. Just observing trend. Oh, now they're talking about artificial intelligence. Oh, artificial intelligence is new rip. It's not just enough to just know the trend. Youth like you need to become enablers and players, influencers in the fourth agricultural revolution. And we are actually in the fourth agricultural revolution, and not just mere trend observers. You are not just looking and but you are on the field playing. You are not just a spectator, but you are actually scoring the goals. And that's what we are seeing. That's actually our motivation. Observing the trend is not just enough. And lastly, technology is key to unlock African agricultural potential. And generally, technology is key. Technology is an enabler. Technology is an enabler. All right. Okay. And let's start. Why should you join us? I haven't mentioned why we do what we do, and why should you join us. Number one, we are creating the future we want in agriculture. Yeah, we are creating the future. We connect you with information and the world of opportunity. On our community and our platform, we bring to you scholarship opportunities, internship opportunities, volunteering opportunities, both local and international, that enhances your growth, your skill development, build your skill set, and ensure to build you into what we set out to do, which is raising the next generation, turning you to be the next generation of tech inclined and digital savvy farmer. Skill development, through project collaboration, community interaction, and workshops. All right. Access to coaching and mentorship from industry leaders and professionals. And this is actually why you have access to Dr. Francelino Rodriguez, all the way from New Zealand, and this is actually what we are actually sharing with you. This is why you need to join us. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I will be introducing Dr. Francelino. Just a minute as I read his bio, his profile. So, guys, if you are actually enjoying us, we'd like you. Thank you so much to pop in your your comments. Dr. Francelino will be coming up soon. Immediately, I introduce him so that you can be able to know who we are actually learning from tonight. You would do well to actually be engaging in the comment section as you actually watch us. Just a minute, please. All right. Uh, so to introduce Dr. Francelino, Dr. Francelino is a senior scientist uh, at Lincoln Agric Limited, based in New Zealand. He has been working in the field of precision agriculture and remote sensing since 2004. He has an MSc and a PhD and postdoctoral studies in the particular field. He is currently the senior precision agricultural scientist at Lincoln Agritech in New Zealand. Um, he got into remote sensing and precision agriculture experience. You know, he has got diverse experience in diverse cropping systems from coffee, sugarcane, cereal, in range of countries, Brazil, Australia, and Mexico. Uh, and he has actually worked on different scale, you know, from plot experiments to small and commercial farms across regional scale. Its research focus on analyzing and interpretation of spatial and temporal agricultural data sets built up by the use of proximal and remote sensing technologies. He is interested in the use of such technology for high throughput phenotyping on and development of decision support systems for growers in different industries. So join me, welcome Dr. Francelino Rodriguez as he takes us in today's webinar. Thank you so much. Doctor, you're welcome. You can unmute.
All right. Thank you very much, Femi, for the introduction and for the invitation to be here with you guys. And for me, it's an honor uh, being able to share a little bit of what we have been doing in the last decade on the usage of remote sensing towards precision agriculture. And let me share my screen here with you guys. So when Femi approached me, we first met at the African Conference on Precision Ag last December in Kenya, Nairobi. And it was a great opportunity, actually. And I've done some work in Southeast Africa and South Asia while I was working at CIMIT. And so I try to be pretty much aware of these constraints of technology transfer to smallholder farming. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. And anyway, I collected some study cases and I into this presentation. And the intention is to give you a little bit of the basics as well on how remote sensing can be used towards these different scales, and a few examples, of course. So this is a joining of materials that is not just from me, it's across many collaborators. To me, agricultural science, it's a very multidisciplinary subject. And I think one doesn't do much. So it's very important to collaborate with people, and it's very important to share knowledge and integrate knowledge. I think that's the most important thing. So yes, again, this is a joining of many. The materials that you want to see here, it's a joining of many people's effort. Okay, so I call it the presentation as remote sensing from plot to landscape scales. And that's where we're going to go. We're going to go through the usage of this technology and techniques, which would be the techniques on plot experiments towards farmers' fields, towards regional scales. Okay. Uh, First, before going to the whole content of the presentation, I want to locate you guys, or where am I? Okay, so this is New Zealand. Now it's 7:20 a.m. on Friday. So I'm coming from the future to give this presentation for you. And we are these two little islands here. And I'm based in the Canterbury region, which is this region highlighted here. Okay. The New Zealand primary industry, it's on its major uh, driven by dairy and meat. So it's livestock based systems. That's the major contributor to the New Zealand GDP. And the second one goes towards horticulture, which is fruit. So we have kiwi fruit production. It's the strongest one. Apples and grapevines. So in terms of regions, the region where I'm based, it's on its majority livestock-based systems. So it's dairy and beef and lamb. And up to the north of the South Island, it starts the fruit production. And we do have some here in the south as well. But grapevines, for instance, it's on the Marlborough region, which is the most important one. And of course, going up, we have different industries as well. So within Canterbury, we are located somewhere here. That's Lincoln, within Lincoln, which is a small town just besides Christchurch. And Lincoln Agritech, who we are. Lincoln Agritech is 100% owned by Lincoln University. So we are within Lincoln University campus, indeed. And with an independent board. So it's two different institutions, two different systems. We were an independent research and development provider to the private sector, government, and NGOs, organizations, specialize in engineering and science for ag, industry, and environment. Today, we have over 80 staff, including research scientists, engineers, and software developers. And they do exist for quite some time. So 58 years history of agritech-based research and development. So the research groups and capabilities, we have the Precision Agriculture Research Group. We have the environmental water quality. We have the new materials. We have Irricad and software, which is a irrigation system software that has been developed by them, and sensing and biotechnologies. So that's where it plays the exciting thing. I'm suspicious to say about that, but I do like it. And we do a lot of optical and radar sensing. So connecting precision ag with sensing, that's where it plays a lots of exciting things. So here is some examples of using microwaves for detecting fruits, object detection, some sensor on nitrogen leaching, some sensor development for soil moisture, using microwave technology for snow depth measurements. And here I am with the remote sensing, low altitude and satellite based through optical, giving a little bit of spicy through these research groups. So coming back to the business. Okay, let's go there. This is the presentation. Let's see here where to start. So let's start from the beginning, no? I think that's very much important. So the usage of the vegetation stress indicators from remote sensing, like what are the vegetation stress indicators that we use in the perspective of remote sensing? Okay, so in a plant, a vegetative body, any sort of stress that might happen there in that specific individual, being abiotic or biotic stress, okay, so lack of nutrient and water, or a disease or a pest happening, two major things are going to happen. So the reduction of transpiration and CO2 absorption, okay, the reduction of photosynthesis activity. So those are the two major things that are going to happen as a side effect of a stress, okay? Without discussing which sort of stress, okay? The consequence of those two factors are temperature, changing on the temperature, okay? So if the plant is lacking transpiration, its temperature is going to be increasing, okay? Photosynthetic pigments. So if the photosynthesis is reduced, the photosynthetic pigments are going to change. What are those? Chlorophyll, carotenoids, flavonoids, so forth, so on. And chlorophyll fluorescence, that's something that's going to be changing, and the structure of the plant per se, okay? So here, this is a very classic graph where it shows the different spectral signature from 3 different species across the spectrum, okay? From 400 nanometers, which here is the visible section, okay? 400, blue, green, and red, okay? 400 nanometers going towards the near infrared. Here we call the red edge region, okay? And going towards the near infrared, right? And then beyond 1200, more or less, nanometers, we go towards shortwave infrared, okay? And usually up to 2400 nanometers. So we have non-spots on this spectral signature, non-spots of chlorophyll absorption, non-spots of water absorption. So these are the known knowledge of the spectrum, of the reflectance, and the reflectance according to the species and according to certain biophysical and biochemical attributes, okay? So this other graph, this just shows you like how this spectrum signature can change according to leaf area, like a low leaf area and a high leaf area, okay, and soil. So this shows as an example on how this spectral signature can change, okay? So one important thing that I want to call attention is, Femi asked me, like, okay, like, can you say something about the interpretation of vegetation indices, for instance? So if you think in a vegetation indices, let's say NDVI, the most famous one, which comes from the 70s, it's the normalization between two wavelengths, right? Between red and between infrared. So when you have your camera there, your multispectral camera, your red edge MicaSense camera, for instance, I don't want to endorse any company here, but it's one of the most popular ones nowadays. You have a wavelength in the red, okay, at something around 690 nanometers, I think. I'm not really sure. But you have a bandwidth, okay? So you have the center of the channel of the band, and you have a bandwidth of that. So you need to consider this bandwidth, because that means it's plus minus a certain nanometers. So let's say they give you the center, but they also give you the bandwidth of this band. And when you are using the wavelengths, the signal of that specific sensor to calculate a vegetation indices, you need to be aware of this bandwidth and this specific wavelength. Let's say the center of the wavelength, the response of the sensor for that specific channel. Okay, so then moving forward, we got there on which would be the factors, okay? And now we go towards how to establish vegetation stress indicators using remote sensing. So how to access these through remote sensing indicators, okay? So I just summarize it through two major steps, two major approaches, I would say. The first one is the empirical relationships. So it's basically the canopy reflectance or the vegetation indices acquired by a remote sensor, a remote sensing technique, and versus ground measurements, okay? So you have ground measurements, you relate with that, those specific indicator, those specific remote sensing variables, which can be the canopy reflectance or vegetation indices, and you have this empirical relationship, okay? So this is the first thing that everybody does. It's simple and fast, right? However, it depends on season, it depends on location, it depends on plant species, and even genotypes sometimes, okay? And suggested by Femi about the vegetation indices, okay? How to interpret vegetation indices. I don't want to go through this table, and it's not readable by purpose, to be honest. This is just an example of how many vegetation indices exist in the literature, okay? It's a lot. This is just a sample, actually. It's a sample that I took from a paper that I published some time ago. And so there are a lot of them. Those scientists, they developed these vegetation indices targeting a specific purpose of their studies, okay? And they prove it that those specific vegetation indices are related to certain traits of the plants. So chlorophyll related, structural related, okay? purely RGB indices or water absorption related. So all of them, if they are chlorophyll related, for instance, they're going to have those wavelengths of chlorophyll absorption, for instance. So in terms of interpreting that, you need just to be aware that you need to respect the correct wavelengths that those formulas are given, and you need to understand the limitations of doing that. Okay, it's a joining of factors, so it's chlorophyll related, but it doesn't tell you the content of chlorophyll per se. Okay, you're gonna need ground truth, you're gonna need ground measurements to build this empirical relationship. Okay, and last but not least, this is just an example of normalized, like the NDVI, right? Normalized difference vegetation indices. This is the whole combination. This is from a study that we did back on 2018, and we were working with hyperspectral sensor. So the hyperspectral goes towards visible, near, some can go towards SWIR as well. The one that we were dealing here was from 400 nanometers to 850, split in 250 wavelengths. So that's why it's called hyperspectral, right? So we were curious to investigate all the band combinations, 2x2 combinations, into a normalized formula, which is the same formula of NDVI, which were the best combinations for accessing grain yield, for instance, in wheat. So if you go, I'm going to zoom in just in one frame of this. This is like hypercubes across a season. Okay, so we flew 10 times, and but I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. So for every combination of wavelengths, we have an R squared that was obtained through the relationship between this specific combination into a normalized formula against grain yield, okay? And that's why we built this whole heat map where we could define where were the best combinations for accessing grain yield, okay? So this is just an example of, let's say, using the concept of vegetation indices into trying to define the best wavelength combination. Okay, so it's endless actually, but you need to be very careful when you are doing statements about that. Good. Nowadays, application of AI in a good library may be a way to go. So AI, it's just a very trendy word, right? So the application of machine learning algorithms or deep learning algorithms, if you have a good library, it can be a way to go for accessing stress, right? Vegetation stress. And the second approach goes more towards a physically based. It's a physically based approach. Which is based on the physics between electromagnetic radiation and vegetation surface. And this is based on the radiative transfer model theory. Okay, so these radiative transfer models, an example of them, it's Prospect and For Sale. Prospect, it's a leaf scale radiative transfer model, and For Sale, it's a canopy scale radiative transfer model. And the joining of them becomes the ProSale. So this is an approach that has been around for decades, and within the remote sensing satellite community nowadays is getting more popular, and people working on low altitude remote sensing is starting to make usage of this approach, okay? And why that's happening. So those relative transfer models, they use biophysical variables as input to simulate reflectance, okay? So you have a set of leaf scale parameters, a set of canopy scale parameters, and you create a way to do it. You create a lookup table through the whole combinations that those range of each parameters can do, the whole combination of them. You create synthetic signatures through those whole combinations. And what happens is, if you have as input the reflectance, you do the inversion of the model, right? So by doing the inversion of the model, you are able to retrieve some biophysical variables from this model. The most popular ones are usually LAI, chlorophyll, carotenoids. So those are plant traits that studies take ground measurements. So they run the forward model, creating these synthetic signatures. They do the flights, or through satellite imagery, they have the reflectance as input. They make the inversion of the model without discussing the ill-posed issue of this inversion, which is a bottleneck of this approach. But then machine learning algorithms can come to help on that, okay? And by retrieving those informations, they are validated with ground information, okay? So I'm not going to go through further details of this approach, but it's fairly complex. It's a little bit more complex, yes. However, it's transferable. So if you have a model that has been well calibrated and validated, this model can be used elsewhere, right? And an example of that is the BVNet algorithm developed by INRA in France, which was embedded within the SNAP tool from ESA. Okay, so the French group, those guys, they're very good on that, and they developed this model, calibrated and validated, and this model was embedded within the SNAP tool from ESA, from the European Space Agency. Okay, and also in a tool from Central Agri, from UCL, University of Catholic of Leuven in Belgium. So what's the deal with that? Like when I say chlorophyll, it's really concentration of chlorophyll by unit of area. So it's not like the vegetation indices, which is unitless. Okay, so when you are doing the inversion and retrieving something, it's biophysical and biochemical variables that you are retrieving, right? So that's something very exciting. It's something that I'm interested in. I'm not an expert on that, and but I'm learning, and that's something that I think it's a very interesting topic, right? So okay, now we defined what would be the factors causing this, and let's say the side effects of stresses, how to establish these indicators, okay? And now we can jump to what is our interesting within Lincoln Agritech, okay? So by having those concepts, our interesting is pretty much what has in this slide in terms of remote sensing from low altitude and satellite-based technologies. So from plot scale, high throughput phenotyping. Well, due to my work across almost 10 years at CIMMYT, which is a breeding organization, a plant breeding organization, this interesting of high throughput phenotyping happened, and I saw that the same tools that we are using for to develop techniques or to develop tools at farmers' fields could be used for high throughput phenotyping as well on the plant breeding industry. Okay, so that's the reason why it comes this interesting. And so always working in partnership with plant breeding industries for developing sensing solutions to access plant traits. Okay, this is for the cliche of that, right? It's the next generation phenotyping to reduce selection costs and contribute to faster genetic gain. So everything that we do at plot scale, we are envisioning on the upscaling of that. Okay, so if we are retrieving a plant trait and a specific plant trait to access nitrogen use efficiency, let's say, or to access draw resistance or heat stress, we are always envisioning, okay, how I can scale this up towards regional scale, towards farmers' fields, regional scales, using satellite sensor data, right? So that's why it comes these arrows here. So they are linked. These different scales are linked, okay? And the interesting of upscaling things from plot scales towards regional comes from that. So at farm and regional scales, the sensing tech for agronomic sustainable intensification, right? The assessment of abiotic and biotic stresses, okay? Yield and quality, assessment from farmers' fields up to landscape scales. And I always like to say quality because many times we ignore quality of the products, but this is becoming more and more important nowadays. For instance, protein content in the grain, or bricks or pole on grapevines. So landscape assessments. So assessment of different metrics at landscape level through remote sensing. Joining the joint of these different metrics into crop models. So that's through data simulation approach. And I'm going to be showing some example of that. And exploring different remote sensing platforms. So optical, SAR, and the data fusion model methods for that. So how to fuse those sensors, okay? Ultimately, farmer-centered design of decision support system. So that's what we are always envisioning in terms of farm and regional scales, right? It's developing a tool where our end user, which is the farmer, can use, okay, to improve livelihood. So that's basically our interesting. And now I think we have the grounds to go to the study case, to some examples, okay? So here is an example of biotic stresses, foliar disease phenotyping, okay? I do not like to say disease detection because I think detecting the disease is something much more complex. We are not detecting the disease per se. We are quantifying its severity in the canopy, okay? And so we need to be very clear about that. And the reason why it's like, for instance, if you have two simultaneous disease in a specific plant, I haven't seen any scientific paper that manage at, let's say, low altitude remote sensing or satellite remote sensing to discriminate between these two diseases, saying what is each disease and how much is the percentage of each of these two diseases in a specific plant. So that's something completely different, right? And what we are doing here are the first steps. What we did here is the first steps, let's say, right? There is one very interesting paper, low altitude remote sensing. Low altitude remote sensing. When I say that, I'm meaning UAVs. I'm meaning airbornes or UAVs remote sensing. Okay, remote sensing done through this type of platforms. Thanks for asking. So here, these examples of foliar disease phenotyping. So an example on maize through tar spot complex, which is a very famous disease on tropical regions for maize. And this study, this was actually our first study on using remote sensing for disease phenotyping. And this came through because on the plant breeding industry, pathologists up to nowadays, they do visual scores. So they go to their experiments where they have resistance genotypes, susceptible genotypes in their checks, and they do a visual score evaluation of those genotypes for every single plot within their experiment. Okay. And so when I saw that situation, I said, okay, why we don't do this? Why we don't try to prove the concept that we can quantify that through remote sensing? So we set up this experiment with different genotypes, fungicided, not fungicided, and at the same time that the pathologist was going to the field and doing the visual scores, we were flying. And after data processing, we made the analytics of that. And in this example, we related vegetation indices with the visual scores. First with yield loss, okay? And afterwards with visual scores from the pathologist, okay? So we had a set of vegetation indices that we test. We flew a multispectral camera and a thermal camera, okay? So we had canopy temperature as well. Pathologists sometimes this can change from one to another, but there where I was working, they do usually 3 evaluations. So from the beginning, very beginning, at early stages of the symptoms, so when they start being visual actually already, towards more severe symptoms. So they do this through 3 evaluations, and they create what they call the AUDPC. Here in these 3D graphs you can see. AUDPC stands for excuse me, area under the progressive disease curve. So the area under the disease progressive curve, okay? So that's what AUDPC stands for. So it's basically doing the area under the curve of these visual scores, which is progressively changing, okay, across time. And by doing that, you have this temporal variable. So you have these 3 visual scores, or 4 or 5, through one unique variable, okay? So you have the area under this curve. So we did the same for the vegetation indices response as well. So we extracted the vegetation indices from each specific plot experiment. We had the visual scores from there as well. We had yield from there as well. So we compared visual scores of the pathologists, vegetation indices extracted from the remote sensing platform against yield loss. In the case of this study, the pathologists explained 90% of the yield loss of that experiment that has the disease, while remote did a pretty good job, right? While the remote sensing variables also explained 90%. So we look into that, said, well, they are telling the same story, they are saying the same thing, right? So then we were curious to see the relationship between the best remote sensing indicators and the pathologist visual score. And that's where we got these 3D graphs, okay? So these 3D graphs shows that they are pretty much related. So we got here thermal information, AUDPC, which is the visual scores, and in this case, MCARI 2, which is the vegetation index that got the most, the highest correlation with yield loss, okay? And we saw that they are saying the same thing, right? Which is pretty cool. So we proved the concept that we could quantify severity of the disease in a selection panel of disease resistance from a breeding perspective. But then, of course, this is the easiest scenario, because why do I say that? Because nothing else was happening on this experiment besides the disease. So there was no abiotic stress. There was no lack of nutrients, no lack of water, because the pathologist was interesting to see which were the most resistant genotypes for that specific disease. So in summary, there was no confounding factors. Okay, so that's the easiest scenario. But then when it comes to farmers' fields, that's a completely different thing, because there you might have management factors that might also affect your canopy reflectance, right? That might also affect the photosynthetic activity of the plant. So that's where it plays the challenging of this topic. All right. And I feel like it's very important to highlight this to you guys, because otherwise we end up this seminar and with you thinking, oh yeah, we can do disease detection, and no, not as simple as it looks like. Okay, so let's see. Well, I'm seeing some questions here. Let's follow up here, and we can go towards the questions afterwards. All right. So we used the same data towards an automation. So we applied convolutional neural network, training the data and validating the severity scores, okay? Thinking that, okay, we can perhaps create an automated process where the system ingests multispectral images or thermal or just one or both, and the output is the visual scores. So we made this exercise with an university in Brazil, and we got some decent results actually. With one of the questions was, okay, how is the model performance as evaluations are done? So how the models performs at very early stage, mid, and very late stage of the disease progress. Okay. And we got some decent results there. So is proving the concept that, okay, we could build a system to automate this whole process. But then here, and one interesting fact is that when I first approached pathologists for doing that, they were skeptical, and they were even thinking, okay, what, you want to do my job or what? And that's not the thing. That's not the intention. The thing is to facilitate their jobs. Thing is that if you build such a system, you can expand your trials, and you're gonna always need to go to your field, right? And you're gonna always need to have your boots dirty and visit your plot experiments, and you're gonna always. But then instead of evaluating the whole hundreds of plots, you can evaluate 10% of that, and with the purpose of validating what the system is giving to you. So you're gonna never rely blindly on what the system will give you to, right? But then again, it's the possibility of expanding things, right? Of testing much more genotypes. And we made a similar exercise with wheat diseases as well: Fusarium, spot blotch, septoria, and rust. And here, this is an interesting thing. We did that in Ethiopia with colleagues of us, and where we compared visual scores from pathologists, UAV-based remote sensing, and satellite-based remote sensing. And we got pretty decent results, actually. So they were all like saying the same thing, which is very cool. So that's more targeting the constraints of the investment constraints, because if you are in an organization that wants to start doing high throughput phenotyping through UAVs, through remote sensing, there are investments that needs to get done. Investments in hardware, investments in human resource, investments in software. And this is one of the constraints. Even though nowadays it's getting more accessible, right? Open source are getting more familiar. The usage of coding environment, it's getting much higher as well, much more familiar. So things are changing, right? Anyway, so we got pretty much decent results as well with those 4 diseases in wheat. And I suggest that yes, foliar disease phenotyping can be done through remote sensing, and I think it's a matter of continuing proving concepts, but then building up systems that can deliver on time to the stakeholders, right? Good. That's on biotic stresses. Plant height. This is a very nice topic as well. So if you start investigating plant height, if you, like in the literature nowadays, you're going to find lots of papers on estimating plant height through remote sensing, which is using 3D point cloud approach. Okay, so you create a digital surface model through this 3D point cloud. You have your baseline, and you extract the plant height through the difference between both of them, right? So having this in mind, we made this exercise with a PhD intern that I had back in Mexico, where estimating plant height through LiDAR, I would say it's not even fair. Like, of course, you need to have a very high accuracy, right? But then we were interesting to access the possibility of doing that through RGB camera, normal ordinary camera, flying with a fixed wings, flying with a multi-rotor, and testing the need of ground control points in the field, and testing if you have RTK system or if you have a PPK system, do we need ground control points or not? Okay, so we had all those questions, and we made this exercise. So we established, okay, very high resolution flying, right? Purely RGB images, so ordinary cameras, high overlap, so 80% overlap, lateral and longitudinal, using RTK, and with ground control points in Z. What do I mean? Ground control points at different heights in your field. So that's the way we thought to validate our outputs, okay? So if you go to the literature, you're going to see lots of graphs like that with very high R scores. However, putting together different growth stages, okay? And this is not the reality, because in the industry, they need the plant height at this specific growth stage. They need the plant height at this specific growth stage. And what's the accuracy when we are measuring at this specific growth stage, right? Or at the latest one. So that's the reality of the industry. So we broke down this graph into different growth stages that we analyzed. We tested what was our outputs against the fixed marks in the field, and using or not using ground control points when we apply the PPK, post-processing kinematic approach. So we first here these results. Okay, our results for ground control points. Okay, if you see here, fixed wings, FW, and multi-rotor, MR. Okay, so those we tested two platforms. Okay, fixed wings or multi-rotor, and we can discuss later the difference of both. It's fine, but anyway, so then we tested what was our accuracy against GCPs, okay, and using the PPK. So you ignore the GCPs and you use the PPK, okay? And we got these results, which is pretty good, actually, for the fixed wings and also for the multi-rotor, okay? So here we saw, okay, if we have a PPK available, we don't need ground control points to, or gel reference correct our orthomosaic, okay? And then here we access the plant heights extracted from the digital surface model, minus our baseline, of course, again against the plant heights measured in the field. This is broken down into different growth stages for fixed wings, first column, and for multi-rotor, second column, okay? And these are the different panels of the breeding experiment that we were testing, okay? So we could see that it varies across growth stages, it varies, okay? We could see at early stage was a little bit tricky. Actually, booting was the most tricky growth stage that we saw. However, at 40 days after immersion and anthesis, 7 days after anthesis and maturity, we got pretty good results, actually. And the thing is, you don't actually, like, you need to access the accuracy, okay, what is your error? And one of the things that it's important to say is that, are you still discriminating low plant as low plant, mid plant as mid plant, and high plant as high plant? So that's one of the things that we were also interested. So because sometimes our error was of 4 or 5 centimeters, and if we go back here, we say, okay, 4 centimeters, 3 centimeters error, root mean square error, okay? 2.14, which is completely accessible, reasonable, I mean, right? And then we made some examples of some transects where we follow up the ground measurements together with our digital measurements, and the trend was pretty much the same. So with this experiment, we saw PPK can replace the usage of ground control points. That's a very good thing, because to the ones that are flying every time and that are doing service, these people, they know how painful can be having ground control points in your fields, okay? So we prove it through this study that if you have a PPK system available, you can get rid of your GCPs. Fixed wings surpassed multi-rotor performance. Yes, it did a little bit, not really significant, but it did. Okay, and plant height estimation through finally no plant height estimation through 3D point cloud can deliver proper plant height info in a breeding program. That's the ultimate conclusion that we had. Okay, so instead of having someone with a ruler measuring plant height on thousands of plots, if you have a system in place and a team in place, you can automate this whole thing, right? Okay. Now the upscaling of that, okay, towards landscape. So we saw those case studies at plot experiments, and now what do we do at regional scales? What do we do at farmers fields? Okay, so remote sensing for development towards landscapes, designing agricultural decision support systems. Okay, this is a case study from a project called Compass, and which stands for Crop Observation Management and Production Analysis Services System. So this project was funded by UK Space Agency and was run in Mexico for wheat and sugarcane. And we were leading the wheat component. This was a PPP partner collaboration, so a private-public partnership, and was very cool. Was very interesting actually. And we had some local universities involved on the sugarcane side, and University of Nottingham for the crop modeling component. And a little bit of background of that project. So we developed that on the wheat component within the Yaqui Valley region, okay, which is the most productive breadbasket from Mexico. It's a region that is agroecologically, it represents 40% of the environments where wheat is produced in developing countries. So that means that things that we develop there might be possible to be transferred to other regions, okay? And that region, sowing and irrigation timing, it's well-known drivers of yield potential, okay? And where even experienced farmers, they can benefit from the adoption of a decision support tool to inform their decisions about those two factors, okay? Of course, we defined that based on the experience of like a very senior scientist that was working on that region across 30 years, but also through consulting farmers, through farmers workshops and meetings. So we were engaging with farmers from the beginning towards to the end of the project, okay? And then we managed to establish these objectives, okay? Which would be to produce a freely available mobile application, okay? That would be providing irrigation scheduling feature, so which would provide a probabilistic yield forecast for potential irrigation events over 10 days window. So this forecast of 10 days window, okay, and telling the farmers what would be the probabilistic yield forecast for every day if he irrigates or not, okay? So giving a recommendation of when he should irrigate his field. Not the amount of the water, okay? But just the timing. Optimal sowing date for a given location within Yaqui Valley, so as a function of the number of post-planting irrigation. So that's a fully irrigated area. It's a desert, okay? And they, on their majority, they do furrow irrigations, okay? So farmers, depending on the availability of water, they have 3 or 4 post-planting irrigation, okay? and a tool where all crop management activities can be recorded and scheduled electronically. So farmers they told us they had too many tools, like too many options, and none of them were able to do everything in the same place. So, and also they had their notebooks, the little leaves that they were taking notes, all spread around, right? So they wanted something that they could concentrate everything in one place. And due to the availability of Sentinel images from ESA, a weekly time series of NDVI images, okay, from their fields during the cycle. And that's not for recommendation per se, but NDVI, as you know, it can be used for scouting, for instance. If it's something is happening there, they can see a spot. Okay, let's go and have a look what's happening. Okay, so Femi, you show it here in my screen, and did my time finish it?
Yes, yeah, I would like you to be a bit rounding up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me wrap up here. I have just a couple of slides to finalize. Okay. So we made, just finalizing this, giving this overview for you guys. We made these experiments across cycles. Okay. We collected very intensive data that could feed into the model. We choose agrocrop from FAO, which is an open source model. We had farmers fields data. We have within station experiments collecting data across years. And we calibrated, we validated this model against yield and biomass. We made some exercise on data simulation. So having here, for instance, this one is interesting. When you are running this model on a daily basis, it creates you a crop cover progression, right? But then we extracted crop cover from satellite imageries, which are those red dots, and we used this information to force the model towards this new information, okay, with the idea of enhancing the performance of the model. So that's what is the data simulation exercise, okay? And some preliminary some results for the optimal sowing date. We made this exercise for every day in the sowing window, okay? And we analyzed it across space and across soil with spatial variability, what would be the yield gap if you sow for each specific date, okay, on each specific date. And this is the more or less the overview of the app, how the farmers would see on their hands, okay, the information. Irrigation scheduling. We Femi, can you mute your mic, please? So we made this exercise of irrigation scheduling. So applying the same amount of water, but at different timing, okay? And by doing that, we tested in an experiment within station with 2 treatments, okay? So ordinary irrigation timing and the timing from the model. And on the first year, we saw a 10% yield increase by using the recommendation from the model. On the second year, there was no yield difference, okay? And this would be more or less the visualization for the farmers in the app, right? And we made tests in farmers fields. We tried to validate that in farmers fields, right? Where farmers recruited themselves, they split their fields into, okay, I'm going to apply what the model is saying in this particular side of my field, and I'm going to do this, my ordinary decisions here, okay? And we didn't see any yield difference between both treatments in this case, okay? Of course, we understand that that might be This is a weather. There's a weather seasonality that can influence on that, right? And last but not least, the modules and the interface. Okay, that was co-designing with farmers, right? So we have workshops with farmers, and the app was co-designed along with them. Okay, by consulting them, and the app freely available was meant to deliver optimal sowing date, irrigation scheduling, crop monitoring through NDVI, and a field book for crop management practice. Okay, and freely available. Okay, what that means. So we came up with this business model in a as an attempt to keep sustained the app after the project ends. So UK Space Agency asked for that. That was developed within the project, and so while the app would be freely available to farmers, company was building dashboards, and we were connecting them with different stakeholders of the chain, and they were offering dashboards to millers, to irrigation management, and to crop insurances, for instance, companies. So it was a sort of crowdsourcing type of data collection through the users. So farmers would have free access to the app in exchange of their crop management data, because they need to upload the crop management data for being able to run the model and for being able to get the recommendations that is possible to get through the model. And no IDs, no personal data. Okay, so the company was using that as a crowdsourcing thing to develop these dashboards and to develop valuable information to different actors of the chain. Okay, and those would be the ones paying for the service and making the system available, keeping freely available to farmers. So that's a very interesting business model in my view. Nowadays, I'm not sure if it's still running. Okay, but I think it's one good option, right? Because we know that farmers don't have money to pay for apps, and this is the one of the last things they're gonna be doing. And but then at the same time, they need to see the value of the thing. So it's a whole cultural changing that needs to start happening, and this happens with one more progressive farmer, and the neighbor sees that the grass is greener there, and things starts, right? So last but not least, this is the last one, Femi: insights and key messages. So remote sensing has become a game changer for agricultural research. Easy measurements with reliable data if well conducted. Okay, otherwise garbage in, garbage out, guys. Okay, monitoring vegetative status at different spatial temporal scales. Okay, plant breeding industry: accelerate the breeding process. Many more lines can be screened in a given time period. Okay, constraints: initial investments needed for purchasing systems, so cameras, platforms, software, hardware, no, and laboring. You need people dedicated to that. However, hardware has become more affordable. Freeware are getting more user friendly. Satellite data might be an option, like the disease study on Ethiopia that I showed. The need of dedicated staff for image acquisition and processing, that's a potential, can drive to potential delays in the data processing if you don't have. Next steps: data workflow pipelines to automate data ingestion and deliver to facilitate decision making. So there are already companies doing that. Ultimately, I would say physically based approach for biophysical and biochemical plant attributes retrieval. So instead of empirical relationships, really retrieve biophysical and biochemical attributes, okay? Replacing proxies to actual estimate plant attributes. Yeah. Adoption, like that's a cultural thing, right? Satellite data are also getting cheaper or free and better, no? Sentinel family from ESA, and can be used for within decision support systems, no? Within decision support tools. Crop modeling, that's very exciting. So intercropping farming system modeling and its performance with EO data simulation. I think that's one of the things that needs to progress. Scaling component, strategies for scaling and adoption. multidisciplinary, guys. It's about partnerships. It's about collaborating with people. Okay, and data management. Attention needs to be done on data management. That's it. Sorry for extrapolating my time. Thank you very much
All
for
right.
keep
Thank you
for
so
keeping
much.
online.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fran. Really
And
appreciate the time.
questions. Yeah, and questions and
Yeah,
answers. I'm happy to answer any question and yeah, to discuss
yeah,
anything.
yeah. I'm just gonna coordinate that right away, so we don't waste too much time. So the first question, I think you've actually answered that. Somebody asked, which is me, just for a participant talking about low altitude remote sensing, and which you answered that these are this could mostly commonly drones, I mean UAVs, and all that with their sensors. Now, the next question is just a minute. Yeah. So when you're talking about this is from Teresa. When you're talking about flying the drone while the pathologists were actually working, trying to compare um, human score, I mean human visual score with low altitude remote sensing assessment. So she's asking, at what height were the drones flying as the pathologists were collecting the data? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I understood the question. Yes. So the height of that specific experiment, we were flying at 50 meters above ground,
okay.
and that was on for that specific platform the lowest height altitude that we could, and that yielded, if I remember well, 5 centimeters resolution on the multispectral orthomosaic and 10 centimeters resolution on the thermal, something like that.
Wow.
I have the paper. If you search for the paper, tire spot remote sensing, and my name is there, you can have all the details. It's open access, by the way, so you can access the paper. Yes, I can drop it the link here quickly. Okay, let's one next one. What are the reasons behind fixed wing UAV performing better than multi-rotor in this experiment? That's a good question, Femi. I don't remember the details. We made a discussion about the weather. Of course, the timing we tried to do at the same time, but there are a whole thing of platform stability. Multirotor is more stable, to be honest, but yeah, like the whole processing and the data ingestion and the processing of the data, like there are many factors that can be involving of that, and we didn't manage to really establish the reasons of that, also because the difference between both of them was a slight difference. It wasn't like a very discrepant, but still it showed, at least, because people sometimes think, yeah, well, fixed wings is not stable, it's not going to be building a good 3D model, no? And that's not reality, actually. And that's the reason why we try to test both platforms.
All right. So just a quick comment. Yeah, Teresa also highlighted. Uh, I mean, talking about remote sensing helping us to get the plant height, making jobs easier. Uh, so following up with the comments, uh, which is, yeah, it is relieving to know that remote sensing
Oh,
can help
90
to assess
March,
plant
that's
height
nice.
measurements. Yeah, that's kind of a measurement because when I was doing my undergraduate research, I was doing a lot of plant height assessments. I'm counting, I mean, measuring hundreds of plants, to be able to get a data set, and it was backtracking. But if you can be able
Yeah.
to use remote sensing technologies like drone technologies with the sensors, I mean, as close as that, we can be able to get information faster. Just thought to actually I like that. So this is a question um, from me. How applicable is satellite vegetation indices? Kind of the deliverables we get
With
from
less than
Sentinel
two.
and that. Yeah, so small scale farmers, typically those with less than 2 hectares farmlands, looking at the resolution of the satellite images.
Yeah, Femi, there's not straightforward answer for that. And
Mm.
I luckily I have here a backup slide. And you asked about resolution, right? So
Mhm.
spatial resolution, 1, 5, 10 meters. So this is a study in Bangladesh, for instance, and this is ground cover from world view, 1.2 meters, and rapid eye, 5 meters. Okay, uh, like you need to be aware of the spatial resolutions and the spatial scales that you are working with. And at the same time, for instance, this study from colleagues from Belgium, they used Sentinel-2 time series in Mali's cotton belt, so for smallholder crops production. So estimation. So there are constraints there that needs to be respected, but you need to be aware of these constraints and the limitations, right? And I would suggest have a look on this paper, what the guys did, which was the scale that they were working with, okay? And yeah, I think it's there's no straightforward answer. Like you need just to
Yeah,
respect the
yeah.
limitations, right?
Thanks for yeah, thanks for making reference to that paper. I'm sure that many who are actually interested in the question will be able to dig out
Yeah,
and
yeah,
expand their horizon with that.
of course, and I do understand the question because like when it comes to smallholder systems, farmers, well, agricultural systems in Africa or South Asia, it is about smallholder farming systems, right? And one of the constraints is okay using publicly available, freely available satellite data sometimes doesn't holds the resolution enough to tackle issues at this scale, right? And I think technology and things are progressing very quickly, and it's still like there are lots of information from the satellite remote sensing community that should be considered. Yeah.
All right. So there's a nice question here from Teresa. Any suggestions concerning having many factors affecting plant
Plant
stress?
stress.
How can one work with that in remote sense? I think this question is like, plant most of the time you do not only have one stress affecting a
I
plant. For
understand.
example,
I understand.
yeah, yeah,
I understand the
yeah.
question. This is a very good one, Teresa. Like this is about the abiotic and biotic stresses, right? Stresses occurred by lack of nutrients or water, or stress occurred by pests or diseases. Uh, this is the most this is the biggest bottleneck of using remote sensing, and the thing is when you are seeing things from the above, you are seeing the reflectance of the canopy, and the reflectance of the canopy can be affected similarly if it's a nutrient stress or if it's a disease stress, right? I just know one paper up to nowadays from Pablo Zarco. He's a well-known scientist within remote sensing, very respectful professional, and it's my reference indeed. And he made up this publication. I think it was sometime last year or 2021, where he tried to address that, like how to manage this confounding factor of abiotic and biotic stresses. Okay, you can try to have a look. Drop me an email. I can send you the link of this study, and they basically use it relative transfer model approach to establish proxies that could, let's say, filter out these abiotic and biotic stresses. Okay, identify. Okay, this is a biotic stress. This is an abiotic stress. And this is the only paper that I've seen so far. I might be others. I don't know, but it's the only paper that I saw so far on this question. And it is that's a bottleneck. Okay, it's not a simple thing. And if you read the paper, it's not a simple methodology. Okay, and how scalable is that? It's another question. Okay, So it is a hot topic. It is a bottleneck. Yeah. That's why I
All
don't use
right.
the wording disease detection, because
Mm.
that's something else. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Francelino. Guys, I am very sure you've been enlightened tonight or this morning in the time zone of Dr. Francelino. And, thanks so much for actually, this is actually, remote sensing is kind of a complex topic that you can be saying hey, and at the same time you're saying B. It's relative depending on the context, depending on the scenario, the situation, and looking at the last question also. But it's actually interesting to actually know how we can use remote sensing in different applications for use cases. You've actually highlighted use cases, you've highlighted business cases, you've highlighted constraints. And when we are aware of these constraints, we can be able to come up with innovative ways. And I'm very sure from this lecture tonight or this time, we can be able to have scientists who can be able to provide solutions, bigger than respected Pablo or you. But this is actually inspiring. Thank you so much for bringing us this knowledge and the latest application of remote sensing. And we will be thinking about how can we apply remote sensing into our farms, into our researches, and to be able to create product development and growth. I mean, this is actually great. We want to say thank you so much, Dr. Francelino Rodriguez. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us tonight. So we will be bringing the April edition of Agriculture 4.0 to a close tonight. And trust me, you'll be hearing from us soon as the next edition and much more. Join our community. I also want to ask you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. This is actually where we will be creating content even beyond our monthly webinars to enlighten you, to bring information to enhance your career, skill set, information you need, and all that for you to grow. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. It's an amazing, it's been an amazing time, and we'll say bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.